Today I'm going to make an Italian recipe for you. This is a chicken lasagna and I'm going to make it without an oven. So stay tuned to see how this comes together. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to make what I like to call a flavor bomb. Now this flavor bomb is the base for the red sauce for the chicken mince to cook in. For that I'm going to use half a carrot, which I've just roughly chopped up, and a small onion that I've chopped up finely. Even if you don't really chop it up finely, it's fine. We're going to blend this all together in the mixie anyways. And the ingredient that gives the maximum flavor, some celery. So I've taken 2 celery stalks, which I've again just cut up finely. In it goes into the blender. Now what this does is it adds so much flavor to the sauce. You'll know once you make it, and you'll know why I call it a flavor bomb. That's beautiful. Some of it you'll see is a little bit chunky. That's fine. It'll cook down really well in the sauce. So it's fine as long as you get it to this sort of a consistency. We're good to go. Pan on low flame, and I'm going to add some olive oil. Remember, we're cooking Italian food. So good quality olive oil will make all the difference here. The first thing I'm going to add to the pan is some finely minced garlic. I'm going to use about 3/4 of a tablespoon. Oil doesn't have to be sizzling hot at this stage. Here. Just saute that in. When you can no longer smell the raw aroma of the garlic, that's when you know it's time to add this flavor bomb. Now, the reason why I call this a flavor bomb is because by the time you're done cooking this sauce, this would have melted completely in the sauce. So you'll never be able to see it, but you'll be able to get all the wonderful flavors of the onion, carrot and celery. And that makes you a sort of an expert cook. You know, people will wonder what it is that makes your cooking different. Well, it's this flavor bomb. I'm going to look to cook this for a couple of minutes, and to kind of give it a little bit of flavor at this stage, I'm just going to add a tiny pinch, very tiny pinch of salt, and just saute this for a couple of minutes. And now while this flavor bomb cooks for a couple of minutes, I'm going to make the tomato puree. Now I like to use a bit of a shortcut. I do not blanch the tomatoes in hot water. I just use them as is, and I'll show you a trick how to use Indian tomatoes so they give a little bit of sweetness in these kind of sauces. I'm just going to roughly cut these because we're going to puree them anyways, right? So you don't really need to work very hard to get beautifully chopped tomatoes. You just need fresh tomatoes. I'm using about 4 medium-sized tomatoes. Last one in, and then it's time to blend. Beautiful. Just add this. Mix it really well with our flavor bomb. Okay, so now the next step is to add a bunch of flavorings. Now the thing with Indian tomatoes is that they tend to be a little bit more on the sour or acidic side. So you must add a tiny pinch of regular sugar. This will just take away that sourness of the tomatoes and will really give you a very good Italian quality sauce at home. Just mix that in. Now it's time to add all the seasonings because we know that a good sauce needs a lot of flavor. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons, yes, don't be alarmed, 2 tablespoons of some paprika powder. If you don't have paprika powder, just feel free to use red chili powder. Yes, I know I said that, don't kill me, but I just want you to make this at home and I can tell you that it'll taste just as good. Stir that in, just that beautiful vibrant red that it's got as soon as I've added it into the pan. Now I'm going to add some chili flakes. I'm adding about 1/4 teaspoon, but if you want this slightly spicier, be my guest and add more. Now the other thing that gives it a little bit of heat and a little bit of kick is some black pepper powder. Don't skip this. Just about 1/4 teaspoon again. Mix that in. And again at this stage, I'm going to add again a very tiny pinch of salt. The great thing is when you add it in such small increments, you don't end up over salting the dish. Mix that in. Now what I'm looking for is for this sauce to reduce by almost half. What happens when you do that is that the flavor intensifies. So I'm just going to move it to a smaller burner on a low flame. So now we're going to make the cheese layer, which is going to comprise about 2 layers in the lasagna. I'm going to use about 100 grams of cottage cheese or paneer as we call it at home. You actually should use ricotta in this recipe, but cottage cheese works just as well. Remember, this is slightly salted already, so just crumble that in. Now I'm going to grate up some mozzarella. This is the hard mozzarella because this will melt really well when we're going to fake bake, not use an oven to make this lasagna. Beautiful, that's all done. Now I'm going to use most of this and mix it with the cottage cheese. I'm reserving about 2 tablespoons here. You'll see what I do there. Now to this, I'm going to add about 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. This is going to give a lot of flavor to this cheese mix. I'm going to add some pepper powder. Use about 1/8 teaspoon, not too much. And about 1/4 teaspoon of some dried oregano. Now this has already got plenty of salt, so you don't need any more. Just give that a good mix. We're going to come back to using this later. And the 2 tablespoons of mozzarella that I had reserved, I'm just going to add it to this smaller bowl. And also add about 2 tablespoons of grated parmesan. Just mix the parmesan and the mozzarella together, because this is the layer that's going to go right on top of the lasagna when it goes in to cook. Now, while we were making that cheese mix, you can see just how beautifully this has reduced. It's become really nice and thick. Now to this, I'm going to add about 1/2 cup of water. Just mix that in. Beautiful. Now I said that this was a chicken lasagna, but you know me, I always like to add some vegetables. So I'm adding about 1/4 cup of corn and 1/4 cup of peas. Just mix that in. And here I've got about 220 grams of chicken mince, which I'm just going to add straight into the pan here. Okay, once the chicken mince is mixed really well into this, I'm just going to shift it back to this flame. Give it a good mix here. And now I'm going to season this some more. So I'm going to add some more pepper here. And a dash more chili flakes, not too much, just very little. And some more salt. Give this a good mix. Now you don't want this to be a very runny sauce. You can see that it's slightly thick. Once you've mixed the seasonings in really well, you're just going to cover this and let it cook. Everything here is bubbling away. The water has come to a boil, and now at this stage I'm just going to add 2 teaspoons of salt before I add the lasagna sheets. I've got about 6 sheets of lasagna because I'm using a 7 by 7 inch square pan. So accordingly, I've calculated that for 3 layers of lasagna, I need about 6 sheets. Now I'm going to cook these till they are what Italians call al dente, which means that it's not cooked at the same level right throughout, because this is also going to bake later. So you'll see that the color will change from the sides and it'll still be slightly, not fully cooked from the center, because it'll finish cooking when we bake it, or actually fake bake it on the stove top. Just drop that into the boiling water. And now it's time to check on the sauce, which is bubbling away. Ooh, beautiful. That's lovely. So now at this stage, to add a little bit more flavor to it, I'm going to add a tablespoon of finely grated Parmesan. This adds not just saltiness, but like a flavor kick of its own. And the last thing to add at this stage is about half a teaspoon of dried oregano. Now the chicken mince is absolutely cooked through, so I'm just going to take it off the heat and let it cool down a bit before we start layering up our lasagna. While the lasagna sheets are boiling, I'm going to show you how to create a fake oven right here on this stovetop. So I've got this really large pan here, which I'm just going to keep on a high flame and cover it. And this is going to be my fake oven that I'm going to let preheat on a high flame for about 10 minutes. The pasta is done boiling. It was boiling for about 5 minutes. I've turned off the heat and I'm just going to take out the pasta sheets, the lasagna sheets, and dunk them into this bowl of room temperature water. What that does is that it stops the cooking process completely. The first layer is going to be the meat sauce. Just spread that out right at the bottom of the pan. Spread that out evenly. Now I'm going to add 2 of the lasagna sheets. You will see that they're slightly big for my baking pan, but that's not a problem. You can either just fold it over like this or just cut it out and also layer it on top. Either way. I'm just going to fold it over on this side. And now for another layer of the meat sauce. And now I'm going to add half of this cheese mix, which is the cottage cheese mixed with mozzarella. The third layer of the meat sauce. Second layer of the cheese mix. Now it's time for the final layer of the lasagna sheets. Now what happens when the lasagna is done cooking is that these edges become nice and crisp. Yes, even in this fake bake situation that we've got going on here. Now you'll see I've got very little final layer now on top. And now the final layer of the cheese is the one that we mixed the mozzarella with the Parmesan with. Here, I'm just going to layer that on. Now make sure you get your gloves on because this whole fake oven here is really hot. So, whoa. I'm just going to drop this stand in here on which I'm going to place this lasagna pan so that it doesn't touch the bottom of the pan, which can be really hot. And now I'm just going to cover this, take the flame up to a medium high and let this fake bake for about 20 to 25 minutes, and you will be able to see the cheese melt from here, from this glass top here. It's been about 25 minutes. You can see I'm putting my gloves on because I can see that the cheese has melted, the lasagna has crisped up from the edges. Oof, and it's smelling divine. So I've turned off the heat very carefully. Make sure you have your gloves on. And very carefully pull this out. Now this is the toughest part of this recipe. You have to let this cool for another 20-25 minutes before you can cut into it and eat it. When I was in college, I was a huge fan of the show Friends, and if you know Joey and his love for food, he used to eat lasagna all the time. Monica, of course, used to make it, and it was my dream to make a really good lasagna at home. And this time I've shared a recipe which you can make even if you don't have an oven.